So I asked you to have a staring contest with me because I heard you say to Michael Markham just yeah, there was a preference in the Clare body for quiet. And
Going to be an interesting conversation.
and I was like, there's such a strong preference for quiet over here in the Alexis body. And sorry, with sort of the dropping away, the evaporation of the illusion of the separate self, there was sort of a fear that this body would never talk again. And it seems like more talking is actually happening.
Different kind of talking.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
It's like they're coming from two different places,
yeah, yeah,
or there's a new flow.
yeah. I wrote some words down, something to read.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Shy, being reserved or having nervousness or timidity in the company of other people. Reserved, slow to reveal emotion or opinions. Timidity, lack of courage or confidence. So interesting. I don't know why, but I just wanted to write down these different terms. Coy, making a pretense of shyness or modesty intended to be alluring. And there's two more. Quiet, making little or no noise, silence, calm, listening, giving one's attention to a sound.
Well, I love that. It's really interesting that that we've come together and there's this sort of mutual desire to sort of speak less. And the bringing up of shyness, which I think I did mention on the call with Michael as something that I had experienced quite a bit when you have the ideas of other people's thoughts, which are really just a projection of your own thoughts. You know you have judgments or ideas about yourself, and because you've got that in your head, you think, oh well, that's what they're thinking about me. And the shyness falls away when you stop having that automatic conditioned mind. When the
Yeah.
when the mind is quiet, then there's nothing to think, and there's no thinking about other people thinking about you. So I
Right.
think shyness is there until it's not there, and it's that sort of open channel, that open flow. But yeah, shyness is yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bugger.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I love the two definitions because those are very two different things. When I looked up the word and actually thought about that, one is being reserved, and then there's this second definition, having a nervousness or timidity, which is a lack of courage or confidence. And what I have found is that as a child, I was quite shy and quite happy.
Just, you mean more introverted?
Yeah, just naturally quiet. Um, yeah, my
Mm.
father was a jazz and bebop, a professional musician. He taught me how to sing and match pitches and rhythms before I could talk. So there was all this music happening and singing
Mm.
and rhythm. The piano is a percussive instrument. So, and he was always counting, like, sort of had like a sort of jolly personality, but very quiet, very quiet. So as a child, there was sort of this natural quiet. I was an only child. I
Mm.
spent a lot of time in nature with animals. And then as an adult, there was sort of like when the conditioning came on heavily, there was like a lot of talking that
Yeah.
started to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you felt this, but it almost feels like you lose the ability to be that quiet little girl who just wanted to be in nature and was almost left to her own devices. My parents loved it when I was quiet. Oh, she's good, she's getting on with things.
Right.
And then when you get older, there's almost that sort of, oh, you're being antisocial.
Yeah.
So I don't, society is so based on extroversion, so
Right.
you sort of lose, you kind of lose a bit of your integrity, when you go to high school and you've got to be outgoing and go to clubs and be part of all these groups and stuff. And sometimes you just want to sit by yourself, but then people think you're weird or a loner.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to people. They integrate into these societies when actually they don't really want to. And you can maybe lose some of that purity that you're talking
Yeah.
about with the music and the
Authenticity.
nature and the beauty. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, with sort of the evaporation of the illusion of the separate self, there was just like a lot of quiet. Like, there was no reason for any of that anymore.
You mean the quietness in your head or the quietness in your outer environment? You just sort of stop going out quite so much, seeing
Both,
people.
but I wasn't talking about either, actually. Now that you mention it, I was talking about no words coming out of this mouth.
What did you do? You went on a silent retreat?
No, because, what's interesting is that in the story of the Alexis body, she was very social. She could go to a party by herself and dance and eat and, friends. But there was not always a lot of talking. And with the evaporation of the separate self, it was like I still was hanging out with my friends and literally, like, sometimes not even answering a question. They were like,
Yeah,
"Are
yeah.
you there? Are you on the phone?"
What was there ever a sort of kind of that phase where you think, oh, I'm being rude? That there's because it's almost that sort of
Of
societal
course.
expectation to
Yes.
talk, and you've almost got to be rude in inverted commas to be authentic. But you were okay with that. You were like, yeah, I'm just not going to talk.
Well, it wasn't that there was, yeah, there was frustration with it that still didn't cause talking.
Frustration with the fact that they were asking questions.
No,
Frustration.
frustration with the Alexis body not talking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or maybe there was a sort of pulling away of the external identity. I mean, you said you see clients. Are you a psychotherapist?
No, I've been doing one-on-ones talking about non-duality and spirituality.
Oh, amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, in psychotherapy, they talk about Winnicott, who's a psychotherapist, who talks about the true and the false self. And the true self is, our authentic nature, that little girl in sort of likes music. And then there's the
Yeah.
false self, which is the kind of societal constructed
Yeah.
identity, which you might call the condition. It almost feels as if you've got to pull
Yeah.
that away. It's like taking off a mask, and it can be
Absolutely.
really tricky because it's like a snake shedding its skin. What's
Yeah.
underneath hasn't quite developed yet. It hasn't quite
Right.
grown to the point where the skin can shed comfortably, and there you are, sort of in a social environment, able to be quite competent. There's almost that sort of slight awkwardness of, I don't really connect with you, but I haven't quite got my own new non-dual identity yet in order to
Yeah.
sort of be socially fluent again.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that resonates.
It resonates entirely, and that's exactly what happened, sort of in early adulthood, around the time of like high school, is that this at like all this sort of like talking happened as a defense almost.
Oh, yeah. Oh God, yeah. I was a bloody nightmare as a teenager. I was so irritating. But it's not, and I think you kind of, you're aware of it, and there's that sort of anxiety. I used to have a lot of anxiety. No one would
Yeah.
have guessed it, but there was a lot of anxiety there. You can talk a lot, but it's just masking your insecurities, isn't
Yeah.
it? And
Yeah.
these girls who are sort of chatting all the time and they seem so confident and they've got it all
Right.
together, but they're not. They're absolutely terrified that they're going to be
Totally.
found out.
To
It's
the point
horrible.
that if somebody asked me, like, do you ever have like anxiety as a teenager, I might be like, never, like, no. Like, when I was like having
Mm.
panic attacks, like barely functionable, the level of like fear happening it was like deep. It wasn't just
It's
like
funny.
anxiety, nervousness. It was like, yeah.
It was pretty bad. I mean, and it's so sad because
Yeah.
you actually can't talk about it either.
No.
So, because the moment you start talking about it is to unravel it and then to unpick that identity. Oh, why am I anxious? I'm anxious because I'm not being my true self.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, this is sort of 16
Yeah.
years of what am I meant to do now? I'm off to university in 2 years.
Yeah.
There's not the sort of ability to do that.
Yeah, it's just the mouth moving constantly as a way of keeping people away instead of connecting with them, literally.
Moving as a way to keep people away.
Yeah.
That is really interesting, isn't it? That we can use
Yeah.
words to keep people at a distance. We can use
Totally.
words to obscure what is here. We
Yeah.
can use words to sort of actually words can connect, but words can
Yeah.
also divide.
Yeah.
They can separate.
Yeah. Or put on a show of how important it is that you see me as someone who likes to talk.
Well, it's society, isn't it? It's just really irritating. Maybe in a few centuries' time, we'll have a society where silence is valued. It's a bit like sort of some tribes, they have the elders are the ones who are revered and valued, and now it's sort of youth is beautiful. It
Yeah.
may be that in a
Yeah.
few centuries' time, actually, it's the wise elders who are the sort of pillars of society, and it's the quiet people who are the ones who sought out.
Yeah.
It's just sort of, and it sounds as if you were very, as I was, part of society. I just wanted to
Yeah.
be popular and liked. I wanted
Yeah.
to fit in, and I had a
Oh
brain that
God.
could do that. And maybe it's sort of natural personality. Some people
Yeah.
are more extroverted. Some people, I don't know, just different temperaments. So
Yeah.
some of us sort of get more caught up in the drama, and
Yeah.
some of us sort of have that natural ability to stand back and observe a bit more.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Having
yeah,
friends, literally when I was a kid, it felt like a lifeline. It felt like a life or death.
yeah. Did you have a good relationship with your parents?
No. I mean, not at the teenage time. you know,
Yeah, yeah,
there
yeah. Well,
wasn't
same,
closeness.
same. Yeah, I think that can be almost an escape, can't it? If you don't have that sort of secure attachment with your parents, you're seeking that attachment, And I think that goes to that's the base of it, isn't it? We're all seeking something. We're seeking to be seen. We're
Yeah.
seeking to be validated. We're seeking
Yeah.
approval, mainly because we don't have it at home.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of, okay, well, I haven't got it from mum and dad, so I'm going to go
Yeah.
and find it from my friends, and
Exactly.
that's how it happens. You're
Yeah.
wanting to be liked. You're wanting that to be popular because you feel like you need something
Yes.
from people.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
remember my first, my best friend now is the same best friend that I met when I was 6. Like I just spoke to her last week. And it's so beautiful because I can ask her like, well, what was I like when I was 7? And like, like I can ask her all these questions. But I remember that friendship, like it was like all the walls fell away. And in the story of Alexis, it was just like, this is it, like friendship, it was so important.
I mean that's beautiful, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can. I mean, I think I've given one side of the coin, but the other side is that you can actually get something genuine from friends. There is that love, which is really what non-duality is for me. There is that connection,
Yeah.
and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so you do actually end up finding what you're seeking when you go out
Yeah.
there looking for it. You can
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah. And my father, by the way, I'm terribly close, totally like in love with my parents now, like so close with them. But as a child, I wasn't. And my father is a wartime veteran and has taken to being like very, very quiet as far as like, when it had come to talking about his feelings. And my best friend who I met, she was from she's Croatian. She was from sort of a Southern European type family where they talked about everything, and sometimes there would be fights, but like everything was like, so she really taught me like how to communicate. Yeah.
And that authentic communication, not just the wordy communication.
Such a distinction. Yeah.
interesting, Alexis, because I sort of feel like we can communicate without words. Like when we first came on the call and we just looked at each other, and I don't know about you, I just felt this feeling in my chest and this kind of melting into something that I can't even put into words.
Yeah. Well, someone like me, someone who's naturally totally okay by themselves for like a walk in the woods, total, like there's a kinship there.
Yeah. Sort of, I don't even know how to describe that. Yeah, the
Yeah.
kinship, a connection, a, a wholeness, a part of something,
Yeah.
and words can fragment that, or they can appear to. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you,
Yeah.
but sometimes when you listen to somebody and you're sort of trying to understand them on an emotional level, that their words are sort of inconsistent with what they're actually, what you're actually picking up in their body language. It can almost sort of throw a spanner in the works. It can trip you up a little bit in terms of connecting with that person. And the
Yeah.
sad thing is, I used to think it was always me. I would always sort of think, oh well, I can't connect with that person. It's something that I'm doing. So I've
100%.
actually got pretty good at communicating. So I have had to use so many different words and so many different attempts at communicating to bridge that disconnection between me and the people in my life, to try and connect with them, because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't realize actually that person just can't connect on an emotional level. The British are quite stiff, the Spanish and the
Right.
South Americans are maybe more extrovert, more sort of that communicate more emotionally. But if you can't connect to somebody who's just using their words, then it's
Yeah.
really not your fault. There's no way actually, that they just can't be connected with it. They're not open to that.
Yeah.
So
My family is half Russian, which is like tough bitches, like seriously, as far as like showing emotion. And it was like, but they were so loving and there for me on an external level. Everything was totally taken care of. And now that I'm older, I really see that and appreciate that. My father's side is Irish, so I mean, there's so much stigma about Irish people being sort of like sensitive, magical in some way, secretive, drunk. I mean, there's all those sort of stereotypes,
definitely that one.
but being overly emotional and communicative and hugging is not really part of it.
Mm, mm.
So
And
yeah,
it's actually it's all of this, isn't it? I think there's a real tendency to say that one's bad and one's good, because you can't argue with the reality of the feelings that are when somebody doesn't speak your language.
yeah,
You can't argue with the hurt. I when you have disagreements with people,
yeah,
it's going to hurt no matter
yeah,
how much work you've done on yourself. If somebody doesn't understand you, it's not a nice feeling.
yeah,
But at the same time, it's all as it is. It's very easy at the time to say this is wrong, this is bad, I reject this as a reality. I reject,
yeah,
my parents being emotionally incontinent. This is wrong, and
right,
you sort of push that away. And I think it's important that we recognize that it's not wrong, that
yeah,
they're not bad, that it's not
yeah,
their, it's just this bloody, it's just this, the issue that they have that they're not able to work through quite yet.
yes,
And it's
yeah,
not their fault. So
yeah,
it's all absolutely as it ought to be. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that sort of imperative feeling that I was describing of having a connection, whether it's a romantic partner, a husband, a family, or friends, that can sort of totally take over. And, sharing feelings can seem, or did seem, as far as the story of Alexis, like whatever, secondary.
Yeah, it's we feel like we need to have that connection. We need
Yeah,
to have somebody see us. We need to be seen, and that need is going to be there until we can see and connect with ourselves. And then any relationships we have are just an added bonus.
yeah,
It's not something that we need in order to be whole and content in ourselves.
yeah,
It's something that we almost pepper our life with, which is beautiful. but you know, we always
Beautiful.
we come first.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I think that it's funny talking about being shy. We've sort of really talked a lot already.
Yes, I think it's going pretty well. What do you think?
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. What I was going to say was, in the story of Alexis, these relationships were so important that, sharing with people that I was having panic attacks, that I wasn't sleeping, that these really severe symptoms, didn't seem possible. It wasn't that I thought about it. It wasn't even a consideration to share this with anyone until the suffering became so intense that it was like all of a sudden clear that nothing else mattered. Nothing else mattered besides feeling better, even relationships.
And was it a moment you remember? What exactly was it that sort of sparked? Was that when the spirituality interest picked up?
In the seeking story, the seeking for this body was well, I mean, you could start from childhood as far as like, there was that moment of like, you know, when I was a kid, my first memory was, my parents were, in an argument, and it was nothing so significant, but it was the first time there was a refusal, like a sort of a natural pushing away in the energy of like, no, you know, and that was the first time it was like, wait a second, this thing is separate, is fragile, it was like the first taste of fear of death. So like going back to the seeking story, but so that's where it sort of started. And then there was like, in the story of Alexis, the seeking took more of a form of ambition. There was an incredible ambition. I was, a professional musician. I was a performer. So there was an incredible ambition with that. And there was a certain point, yeah, where sort of a bunch of external things happened, and it was a matter of a weekend where it's funny, I didn't think I would talk about this today, but we didn't have any sort of plan
You
other
don't
than
have to.
the definition of words. Thank you. Um, where everything sort of fell apart externally. My relationship, I had a romantic relationship, and that ended. He was in my band, that ended. And then we were on holiday, and we came back to our flat. I'm talking for some reason in a British way. Came back to our apartment, and there was an eviction notice on our door. I hadn't had a lease, and so I had this kind of feeling hanging over me. I had a lease that was a year, and then I asked my landlord to renew it, and he said no. And it was kind of like, I could have moved out, but it was like, then I was there for another 3 years. It was unexpected, but it was just like everything changed. It was like my living situation was gone. It was the middle of the winter in New York City. My band was gone. My relationship was gone. And it was just like, for the first time, it just became clear that feeling better was all that mattered. Like none of that even mattered. And then it was just, I moved to California, and started sort of a healing journey, which what a mind fuck that can be. But somehow there was absolute desperation, just absolute desperation to try anything. And this facade that everything was okay, that I wasn't, having these panic attacks, or, the level of fear just completely wasn't important anymore, as well as like if friendships last or if they don't. And then it was like, all everything like psychotherapy, IFS, Chinate song, yoga, books, 12-step programs, diet, everything. Just a total willingness and openness to try or do anything to feel better. Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah.
I just love your laugh.
Mm.
It's so full of joy.
Thank you.
You know, you can really see that you've done this. As you were talking, I could feel, I was with you, that depth.
Yeah.
It's like someone pulls the plug on your whole entire existence,
Yeah.
and you just sink in through the drain hole, and you're trying to cling on like, oh no, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, but you have no choice. You're just sinking
Yeah.
into this emptiness, everything that you cherished, your music career, your
Yeah.
apartment, your all the popularity, everything there might have
All
been, just sort of dissolving into nothing. And you're like a phoenix from the ashes. You do the yoga, you try all these different techniques,
yeah.
and you slowly build yourself up again, except it's on a new foundation. The words are
Yeah.
coming from a new place inside you. It's no longer
Yeah.
the false structure, it's the authentic structure.
Yeah. And this thing that was happening, this absolute suffering that was happening, like all of a sudden becomes the only thing that you want to talk about. And then you're like, wait, why wasn't I talking about this? This is so important.
It's such an important point, actually, because again, in non-duality, the ego is seen as the enemy and something to avoid and something to destroy and something to run away from almost. And it's the thing that we fear that we need to face. We can't run away from what we're feeling. We can't run away from the discomfort, the suffering, the pain. I mean, a lot of us seek non-duality because we're trying to avoid our suffering. We're trying to overcome our
Yeah.
suffering. We're trying to resist our suffering. We don't want the
Right.
suffering. And people don't want to hear this, but the only solution is to face it, as you did.
Yes.
You just want to talk about it. You just want to share it. You want to cry. You want to scream. You want to
Right.
sit with someone and hold their hands and just tell your story and
Yeah.
get it all out. It's like regurgitating.
Yeah.
It's going really into the deep of it, the depth of it, and then you realize that actually there's nothing in the way. There's nothing there to be afraid of.
Yeah.
There's not this big monster guarding anything. It's really
Yeah.
just a little pussycat at the end of the day.
Totally.
So it's quite a lovely thing to explore that.
Yeah. It's like the lobster that squishy.
The squishy lobster.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I felt, is like a pile of ooze that clearly couldn't talk anymore either.
Reminds me of the film The Wizard of Oz, with the guy at the end who's in the tower, and it's the noise and the voice is so loud and frightening, and you
Yeah.
think, oh God, that's so scary.
Right.
In that, but that's sort of the fear of the self, that I'm so scary. These feelings are so scary. This anxiety is so scary.
Yeah.
The suffering is so scary.
Yeah.
And you open the door, and like you say, it's a little gooey lobster.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite
Yeah.
cute.
A pile of mush with eyes. That's how I felt.
A very beautiful one.
Thank you.
Because you do still have that, you do have the beauty, you still have the love and the life. And that's the fear, isn't it? That if you let go of all of this, if you sink into all of this, then you're going to die, you're going to vanish, there's going to be nothing left. And the beauty and all the things that we cherish the most, I think there's a fear that that's going to not be there when you get back.
Yeah.
When you go into that suffering, it feels like death. It feels like, it's so painful. And that's the trick, I think, of the ego. It convinces you that it's life. It convinces you that it's love. So if you go and face it and it's seen to be non-existent, you might think, well, that means love's non-existent. That means life's non-existent.
Right.
So it's absolutely not. That's just a trick. But you've got to almost call its bluff. You've got to have that courage. And that's why conversations, I think, like this are so important. Because if I hadn't have heard all of the non-duality conceptual ideas, much as I wish I hadn't sometimes, but if I hadn't, then it might get to that point where I get to that place of fear and say, no, this is too much, this is too scary. But knowing I've got friends who have done it on the other side, in quotation marks, that it's quite safe to exist in this place of freedom where there's nothing to sort of hold on to. Where there's no sort of concepts or to face it completely safe. It is safe, and
and
it's
what
fine.
can come up, sorry, actually, I did want to mention I was watching this show last night, this Australian show, You Can't Ask That. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's just interviews of marginalized communities, but you know, people with facial deformities, people, wartime veterans, you know, like blind people, refugees, and it's so incredible and so touching. But what I found is I was listening to these people, you know, these war refugees and these, you know, recent, you know, all of these different groups of people, and you know, uh, it's like, how do I want to say this? But you know, the group of people that had tried to commit suicide, and the group of people that you know had been addicted to drugs, the things that they were sharing, and I don't even know why I brought this up, but I thought, you know, the people with facial deformities, the people who had been through these like horrific life circumstances, you know, there was this story that they would share this incredible suffering. And actually, so many of them seemed well adjusted. They liked themselves. They said, well, I like how I look. It's other people's problem. You know, if they don't, and I'm not to say there weren't challenges, but compared to, you know, the people who had, you know, tried to, you know, I was, you know, my story is that I was, you know, there were a lot of suicidal thoughts growing up. And I was just noticing like the level of suffering and how it had nothing to do with life circumstance. These were just beautiful people. They had sort of pretty normal lives. And it was just such a testament to like how much suffering there can be just with that feeling of being, you know, cut off.
Isn't it incredible? You get these sort of young, beautiful women who have these suicidal thoughts and think that they're hideous and life's not worth living. And then you get these people who, as you say, have got horrible facial deformities and from a sort of objective point of view might have a lot to be unhappy about, yet they've managed to find a way to see what beauty actually means.
Yeah.
They see beauty not from the societal perspective,
Yeah.
but from what it actually means. So it's, as you say, it's the ideas, it's the beliefs that we have that cause the suffering. It's
Yeah.
nothing to do with the circumstances.
Right. And these people with these extreme, you know, deformities, some of them are married, they had careers that they enjoyed, and they said things like, I like myself, you know? And when people have come up and said, oh, Jesus loves you and all that stuff, how offensive that is, because it's implying that they don't.
It's implying that there might be a possibility that they think that there's any other way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
I know that. I know that there's love. Why on earth would there not be love for me looking different to how
Yeah.
you think I ought to look?
Right. And
That's obviously their issue.
yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing with, you know, someone who is a model or tall, skinny, pretty, and, you know, somebody using that an excuse. Well, I can just be mean to her. I can, you know, like, like it's okay to be mean to someone because of how they look.
You mean sort of people think it's okay to be mean to somebody who is outwardly attractive or has things
Right.
that someone might envy.
Right.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the truth is, you have no idea. You have no idea what it's like to be someone else ever. I had a staring contest with a deer the other day. Usually they win, you know, but this one was pretty long. And in the middle of the staring contest, this was in the woods, she just lied down and went to sleep.
Yeah.
I've never seen a deer do that when I've had a staring contest with her.
I think animals must have this awareness. My cat sometimes, I sometimes slow blink at her and she slow blinks back, and then I'll do it again and she'll do it back. And people must think I'm totally mad because it goes on for about 5 minutes sometimes, just back and forth. And I'm like, I'm not going to stop until you stop. But then I hear her purring, and
So
I think, oh,
funny.
bless you. They get it. I think there must be something in this that they just get. It's
Yeah.
the emotional language. We obviously don't speak
Yeah.
the same language.
Yeah. That's so funny. So awesome. Animals are so
So,
beautiful. They're such gifts. So in the moment, whatever that means, there's no moment because there's no continuum.
you look around at people bustling to the shops and the underground and stuff, and you think, well, there's my cat who hasn't moved from the same spot on the sofa all day. I don't know who I'd rather be.
Yeah. 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 That societal feeling of like never enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which you can have compassion for, because
Yeah.
it seems to be just the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading somewhere. I just wanted to ask you how you felt about this. I was reading somewhere there was this study done about hugs and how Britain has the least hugs of any country in the world. I just wondered
That's
what
so
you felt
funny.
about that.
Oh, that is so true. Actually, this is quite a sad story. My dad, the first time his mother ever hugged him, he was 18 years old and he had just got a place at Cambridge University. That was the first time that she was, that was what the first thing that she thought was worthy of affection, was him going to a good university. Um, he probably won't ever watch this, but he wouldn't mind because he told me this story. And she's 100 years old, so she won't. But I just think
Hi,
that's so
Mom.
telling, isn't it? Yeah, hi, Grandma. I love you, really.
I love you
Um,
too.
I mean, it's the thing is, it's not even her fault either. She was born in 1924. It was sort of the war. She lived through the war. It was so stoic, just get on with it. So functional. My parents both went to boarding schools, so there was very little affection. There were no hugs from the teachers, obviously. They just didn't have, there just wasn't that culture.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of just get on with it. And there's also a sort of the British humor. It's a real dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's the sort of like there's something quite sinister underneath it if you really listen to
I
what
love
people are
it.
saying. But because people do, it is actually funny because you've had to go to such extreme degrees to find a way to express your anger that
Yeah.
it's actually quite hilarious. But yeah, because anger isn't a thing either, and emotions just aren't. It's very sad. So I think the hug, that physical
Yeah.
expression of emotion, I can understand why we've got quite a low percentage of that, and also
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't get me started. I'll go on for a
Yeah.
while about it.
No, but I was curious just about how that can affect a culture.
Yeah, it's quite fun, really. I mean, I like the politeness. Everyone's sort of, oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. And if you brush up against someone on the underground, both people sort of jump a mile. I'm ever so sorry. There's the boundaries are a big thing. That sort of
Yeah.
lack of physical connection means that
Yeah.
people are very respectful of each other's personal
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
So it's good for the separate self. The separate self loves it. There's
Right.
lots of space, lots of
Right.
distance. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fine. It's
What
quite
I
fun.
found, yeah, I was just curious about it. What I found in my own family was very affectionate, and that was that felt really good. It felt like if there wasn't a space for sharing deep emotion, there was a space for a hug, holding, holding each other's hand, whatever.
Mm. Well, I mean, the American culture is actually very different. We have that as a sort of a tongue-in-cheek insult, or you're being so American. If somebody says I love you, it's, oh, don't be
Right.
American. But in a way, as you say, it can be even just having a hug, even if you don't really mean it.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something mammalian about that. They did that study of monkeys, didn't they? Where they took a load of monkeys away from their mothers, and they gave them a choice between food or a cloth mother.
Yeah.
And it actually is really sad. The monkeys all chose the cloth mother because they just wanted to be near
Right.
something, even if it wasn't the actual mother. They just wanted that warmth. They wanted that comfort. There's
Yeah.
something about us as mammals that we just need that physical touch.
Right.
So I think you guys have probably got it. You're probably more emotionally balanced than we are, but I couldn't possibly judge that.
No claim to be over here.
Yeah, we'll see, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I worked as a massage therapist for a brief period, and I had my first stint at the clinic, and this person came in that was covered. He was covered in boils and rashes, like it's all his skin. He had some kind of story. He wasn't sure, maybe it was asbestos, who knows, but my supervisor said, like, you absolutely don't have to take this client. It was my first client ever to try, at the clinic. And she said it a few times, like, and I was like, no, this is okay. And I she said, put on gloves, and I did this treatment of him where I massaged him, lightly over his skin, for 10 weeks. And by the end of those 10 weeks, the rash was completely gone. The skin
It's
turned
so
back to
beautiful.
normal.
That's so, so, so lovely. The
Yeah.
power of the touch. And
Yeah.
also more than that, with you, the power of awareness, the power of love
Yeah.
that you actually, and that man who has probably been rejected and turned away
Yeah.
was accepted. That's what healed him. It was the acceptance.
Yeah. I mean, if someone doesn't have family, doesn't have a romantic partner, there's no touch in their life. And if that's the only thing that could help the body, you know?
I mean, this is why I'm a psychotherapist. There's people sort of say, "Oh, well, I don't need therapy. I've got my friends," but that's great. Not everybody has that, or they might have friends or family who haven't got the ability or the capacity to really fully listen to them. This is
Yeah.
why we need services like psychotherapy to
Yeah.
be that person who actually people don't have in their lives, who just genuinely does care for them and just listens once a week.
And it's so interesting. Of course, there's all this school and these credentials. And, I'm not saying that it's not totally worthwhile, but in the end of the day, sometimes somebody just wants someone to talk to.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what you're doing is incredibly valuable. I did my training because I had psychotherapy for a fair amount of time in my 20s.
Yeah.
And at some point in the therapy, I was working at a big corporation, and I was marketing manager for
Yeah.
a big brand. And at one point, I went into the session, and we'd been having an argument about in the boardroom about sort of how to make more money. It was an alcohol company, so sort of selling money to Eastern Europe. And I was just thinking, oh my God, we're spending all this time talking about how to knock some new player, some independent brand by some family in Eastern Europe who are trying to make a living. And here we are,
Yeah.
this huge multinational company trying to basically destroy their income. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I looked at my therapist and I just want to do what you do. And that's why I did my training. It was because of her. It's not to say that I needed necessarily the qualification to share, to sort of be good at what I do.
Yeah.
To be honest, to qualify, it was 5 years. It was interesting, but I've got a friend who has not got any formal training, and he's been more helpful to me than most of my course professors in terms of actually making me a good psychotherapist.
Yeah.
I'm a very, clever psychotherapist in inverted commas. Like I know the language, I know the books and the
Right.
text, but in terms of actually being a good psychotherapist, a lot of people I did my training with, I would definitely not recommend. In fact, the receptionist, who was a lovely man,
Yeah.
said that 80% of the people who graduated he would not want to see as therapists. And I would probably take his word on that, quite frankly. So it's
Yeah.
not, you're right, it's not about the qualification. It's about, as you said, it's the acceptance, it's the love, it's the
Yeah.
listening ear. And you don't need a piece of paper to do that. You just need to be a genuine human being,
Right.
which you are. So we're kind of doing the same work.
Yeah. My mother is a therapist. She specializes in a type of psychotherapy called IFS, Internal Family Systems. Have you?
Yeah, I see you're in the group with Sid and Laura,
Yeah.
aren't you? The IFS group.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What do you think about it?
I love it. And I've been doing my own, I've been doing my own work. I have a psychotherapist, yeah, a non-dual psychotherapist who does IFS with me, and I love it. I love it.
Can you
It's a
tell
little
me?
bit, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, can you tell me more about it? I mean, maybe you're about to, because I genuinely would like to know how it fits into non-duality and these different parts and what they represent in our psyche and yeah, how it
Yeah.
can actually work.
Yeah, yeah. My mom teaches IFS all over the world, and her and my stepdad have books about it. My stepfather, wrote a book called Self Therapy, which is sort of a manual, for therapists about IFS. But essentially, I mean, if you've heard of the concept of inner child, it's similar to that, except that it's an entire family. So maybe you have parts that are taskmasters that sort of get you up in the morning, and then you have tasks that are firefighters. The firefighter part is one that sort of puts out the pain, like, if a feeling that comes up that is perceived as too much, it goes for like the banana nut muffin, or like, um you have exiles, which are parts that are you might be unaware of until you get to a session and they sort of turn up, and you can be sort of surprised by what you hear a part say. you know that's the fundamentals, and I'm not an expert of IFS.
I absolutely love it. I posted something in that group the other day about an exile of mine, actually. Um, yeah, because we're all, and I find this with my clients sometimes. They come into the room and there's someone different every week. We all have all these different
Yeah.
parts of us, and it's not multiple personality disorder, but it can seem like it
No.
sometimes because there's all these different presentations of people, and sometimes they're not even aware that the other one exists. There's the
Yeah.
how can
Yeah.
possibly the I mean, my example was the part that loves life and the
Right.
part that wants to create and be generous and the
Yeah.
part that just wants to blow the whole place up.
Right.
The part that wants to
Right.
say no, the part that's got the boundaries, the
Anger.
part that
Yeah.
wants um
Yeah.
to end it all, quite,
Yeah.
basically. How
Yeah.
can those two coexist together?
Right.
Right,
They
it's
can.
they well, they can. It's the as Laura's written a book I need to read, which is Awaken to Love,
Awaken to love.
and
Yeah.
have you read it?
Not yet.
I'd like to read that, and it's about the self holds all of these parts. The parts are obviously, so these two apparently contradictory parts, and that's the beautiful paradox of non-duality. There's
Yeah.
the two, the fact that duality and non-duality both exist is the paradox. The fact that
Right.
this life-loving part and the death-loving part both exist,
Yeah.
that's also the paradox.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
thing that sees the two different parts can't be spoken about, because if it was to be spoken about, it would be spoken about through the words of a part. So this is sort of the interesting dance that
Yeah.
we're kind of playing, talking about all the different parts, and together it makes up the whole. It's like the sort of rainbow refracting from the white light.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that makes IFS different from traditional forms of therapy is that it's not the therapist that's sort of the agency of healing, it's the self. So there are all
Yeah.
these sort of parts perceived and talked about and explored, and these sort of images and visuals that can come up, or feelings in the body. But the self is the sort of healing agency, and the therapist is only a facilitator. And how that is really interesting now that the perception of an illusory self has evaporated. um you know when a part comes up for the Alexis body, and it's just energy, it's just a feeling, but it can be sort of seen in the mind's eye as a little person with an identity and a somatic profile and so on. And when a part can come up for the Alexis body, instead of looking to the body as the self, like this limited physical form, the part can start to become aware of everything.
What gives it its freedom?
Yeah.
That's what sets it free. If it's been exiled, that's what brings it into the light.
That's it.
It sounds like such beautiful work.
Yeah.
Gosh, so interesting.
Yeah.
So much we could talk about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this was so, so lovely, and I'm so happy we did talk. And I'd like to talk again sometime soon. And I was listening. You've been doing a group with Michael Markham about therapy and non-duality. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, we need to pick that back up again. It's on pause at the moment. It's an interesting idea, actually, this. Can non-duality and therapy, um, can they work together? What exactly is the link? We're talking about the different ways that therapy can inform, or that non-duality can inform therapy, like IFS, like inner child healing, like massage. There are all of these different forms of therapy that come from non-duality, and the awareness, the acceptance that manifests as spiritual guidance, as psychotherapy, as massage, as Reiki, as IFS work.
Yeah,
There's all these different forms it can take. And so, therapy and non-duality as an idea. I mean, non-duality is the therapy.
right,
So the group may as well just be called non-duality.
right.
Yet to sort of call it non-duality in therapy is almost a lie, because it's to sort of indicate that there's some sort of a separation.
Right,
Indicate that the therapy is anything other than non-duality. Because
right,
even in therapy, which is CBT, even in therapy
right.
which is more clinical, it's still non-duality. What isn't
Absolutely.
non-duality? What
The
what
one
what
thing
is
appearing as anything, you know,
Yeah,
is
absolutely. So I think we will restart them again. Uh, I'm not really sure what the format is. I sort of want it to be of sort of interest, of benefit. This is why I do these talks. This is why
yeah,
I'm here right now. It's
yeah,
people say, oh, what's the point in talking about non-duality? Like, why are you even
yeah,
having these conversations? And
yeah,
we're having these conversations because, much as people say in non-duality groups, oh, there is no self, oh, yeah, that we are all one. Well, your actions and behaviors don't exactly indicate that you believe that, because
yeah,
if you look at the state of the world and you look at the state of your relationships, it would suggest something otherwise.
right.
So it's almost this sort of wanting to reconcile that, wanting to it's an expression of love, isn't it? It's like, if
Yeah,
we go back to IFS, if there's an exile, if there's something
yeah,
that feels like it's
yeah,
moving away
yeah,
from source energy somehow, it feels like it's hiding in the dark.
yeah,
There's a natural instinct in me to welcome that back
yeah,
to source, and that's what I do when I write. That's the conversations. It's that sort of
yeah,
welcoming back to source. So there does need to be some sort of energy from me in anything I do that feels like it's a sort of loving energy. So I'm gonna see where the wind blows, and we'll see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah, totally. Yeah,
I'll keep you posted.
yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I love
You've got to bounce because
Michael
you've got a
Markham.
client. Oh,
Yeah,
he's so wonderful, isn't he? I watched the video that you did with him as well.
you did.
Yeah, he's such a lovely man.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
beautiful.
Okay,
Oh,
well, thank
well,
you so
Alexis, it's
much.
so lovely to talk to you. Thank you for recommending that we have a chat. I'm really glad we
Yeah,
did this. And
me too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying before. I just wanted to say, yeah, there doesn't have to be a goal to this conversation or any, really, right?
I don't
As
think
far as
so.
like, yeah,
I think it's paradoxical, isn't it? Because it was a genuine it was a love. I saw them I thought, yeah, I'd love to talk to Alexis. That's so lovely.
yeah,
And there was a kind of there was also a reason to do that. There
yeah,
was an enjoyment and there was a reason. And if we're
exactly.
going to spend our time, then I think if we can
Yeah,
have both, then that's wonderful.
yes,
It's
yes,
I'll go and have dinner and maybe do some painting or something tonight. And that'll be there's no sort of purpose to that. That's just enjoyment. But
yeah,
or maybe there is
yeah,
a purpose. Who knows?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I
just
thought it
me.
would be totally open-ended, and then all of a sudden I wrote down all these definitions to terms. Shyness and all of that.
Well, I
Great.
think we've had a great chat, and
Yeah,
yeah, I look forward to
yeah,
chatting again.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, oh, so much love to you. Thank you.
So much love to you too. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.